The crystal wine glass in Augustus Pemberton's manicured hand shattered against his polished marble floor as he witnessed the most shocking sight of his refined 38 years, a woman climbing down from the dusty stagecoach, wiping her grease-stained hands on a filthy apron while letting loose a string of profanity that would make a cavalry sergeant blush. It was September 14, 1885, and what should have been the elegant arrival of his cultured Eastern bride had just become a nightmare that threatened to destroy his carefully constructed reputation as Silver Ridge's most sophisticated gentleman. The woman standing in his immaculate courtyard bore absolutely no resemblance to the refined lady whose eloquent letters had spoken of Mozart, Shakespeare, and proper tea service, instead presenting herself as someone who appeared more comfortable in a mining camp saloon than a gentleman's parlor. Augustus had spent months preparing his Colorado mountain estate for the arrival of Isabel Hartwell, the cultured widow whose correspondents had painted her as the perfect complement to his own refined sensibilities and social aspirations. His sprawling ranch house, built with imported materials and furnished with pieces shipped from Boston and New York, represented everything he had worked to achieve since leaving his family's textile fortune to prove himself in the American West. Every room had been decorated to impress a woman of breeding and education, from the library filled with leather-bound classics to the music room containing a grand piano that had cost him more than most ranchers earned in a year. The reality now cursing at the stagecoach driver about her battered luggage challenged every assumption Augustus had made about the woman who would become his wife and social partner. Isabel Hartwell stood nearly 5 feet 8 inches tall, with muscular arms that strained against her travel-worn dress and calloused hands that showed years of hard manual labor rather than delicate needlework and piano playing. Her dark brown hair hung in a practical braid rather than the elaborate styles fashionable among Eastern society ladies, and her sun-weathered face showed the effects of outdoor work that no refined lady would have endured willingly. "Driver, you handle that trunk like it contains my grandmother's china, not like you're throwing feed to hogs," Isabel shouted with a voice that carried clearly across Augustus's carefully landscaped property. Her words contained both authority and a distinctly unladylike vocabulary that made Augustus wonder if some terrible mistake had occurred in the matrimonial agency's arrangement. The woman whose letters had quoted Tennyson and discussed the finer points of classical literature was apparently someone who felt comfortable berating working men in language that Augustus had never heard from any respectable female acquaintance. Augustus's staff, including his butler Harrison and cook Mrs. Adelaide, watched from the windows of the main house with expressions ranging from shock to poorly concealed amusement as their employer's refined bride revealed herself to be something entirely unexpected. The household had been prepared to welcome a sophisticated lady who would elevate their already impressive domestic standards, not someone who appeared to have stepped directly from a frontier mining camp into their elegant mountain retreat. Mrs. Adelaide, in particular, seemed fascinated by the contrast between Isabel's rough appearance and the refined menus she had prepared based on Augustus's descriptions of his bride's cultured tastes. From his position near the broken wine glass, Augustus could see Isabel examining his estate with an appraising eye that suggested practical experience rather than aesthetic appreciation. Her gaze moved from the imported stonework to the carefully maintained gardens to the expensive architectural details that had been designed to impress visitors with his wealth and sophistication. Instead of the admiration and gratitude he had expected from a woman grateful to escape whatever modest circumstances had led her to seek a husband through correspondence, he saw evaluation and perhaps even criticism in her expression. "Well, I'll be damned," Isabel muttered as she hefted her worn leather bag and started toward the front entrance of Augustus's mansion, her sturdy boots leaving dusty prints on his spotless stone walkway. "Fancy as a funeral parlor and probably twice as cold." Her observation carried clearly to where Augustus stood frozen in his doorway, uncertain whether to greet his intended bride with the formal courtesy he had practiced or to demand an explanation for the dramatic difference between her letters and her reality. Isabel Hartwell strode through Augustus Pemberton's marble foyer with the confidence of someone accustomed to entering spaces where she didn't quite belong, her practical eyes taking in the imported furnishings and expensive artwork while her calloused hands left smudges on the polished brass doorknobs. At 29 years old, Isabel had learned to read people and situations quickly during her 5 years cooking for rough mining camps throughout Colorado, and what she saw in Augustus's horrified expression told her everything she needed to know about how dramatically her reality differed from his expectation. The refined gentleman standing before her in his perfectly tailored suit and shocked silence was clearly someone who had never encountered a woman shaped by genuine hardship rather than drawing-room conversations and afternoon tea parties. "Mr. Pemberton, I presume," Isabel said, extending a work-roughened hand that showed permanent stains from years of handling cast-iron cookware and feeding hundreds of hungry miners. "I'm Isabel Hartwell, and before you say anything, I know I'm not what you ordered through that matrimonial agency." Her directness cut through the awkward silence that had settled over the elegant room, forcing both of them to acknowledge the obvious mismatch between expectation and reality. Augustus took her offered hand briefly, his soft merchant's fingers recoiling slightly from the calluses and strength that marked someone accustomed to physical labor rather than gentle pursuits. The correspondence that had brought them together had been carefully crafted by Isabel during lonely evenings in mining camp boarding houses, where she had drawn upon her former life as an educated woman to create letters that emphasized culture and refinement while deliberately omitting the brutal realities of her current existence. Before losing everything in Denver's Great Fire of 1880, Isabel had indeed been the cultured lady Augustus expected, teaching literature and music to the daughters of wealthy families while living a comfortable middle-class life surrounded by books, art, and intellectual conversation. The transformation from refined teacher to mining camp cook had been born of desperation rather than choice, but it had also revealed strength she never knew she possessed. "Miss Hartwell," Augustus managed to say, his voice carefully controlled despite the chaos of his thoughts, "your letters gave me the impression that you were someone with different experiences and interests than what I observed before me." His diplomatic phrasing couldn't disguise his disappointment and confusion as he tried to reconcile the elegant prose of her correspondence with the rough-spoken woman standing in his pristine foyer. Isabel's laugh, when it came, was hearty and genuine rather than the delicate feminine sound he had imagined from her written descriptions of musical entertainment and social gatherings. "My letters were true enough," Isabel replied with the honesty that frontier life had taught her was more valuable than polite deception. "I do love Shakespeare and can discuss the finer points of Beethoven's symphonies, but I can also cook for 200 men, break up barroom fights, and shoe a horse when necessary." Her admission revealed the complexity of someone who had been forced to develop skills that transcended social boundaries, combining intellectual cultivation with practical abilities that most refined ladies would never need or want. Augustus found himself staring at her stained apron and wondering how someone who wrote so eloquently about art and literature had acquired such obviously manual skills. The butler Harrison approached discreetly, his professional composure intact despite the unusual circumstances, to inquire about luggage arrangements and dining preferences. His question forced both Augustus and Isabel to confront the immediate practical question of whether their arrangement would continue despite the dramatic difference between expectation and reality. "Sir," Harrison said carefully, "shall I prepare the rose room for Miss Hartwell, and would you prefer dinner served in the formal dining room or perhaps somewhere more comfortable?" His tactful suggestion acknowledged that Isabel might feel out of place in Augustus's elaborate social settings while offering alternatives that could accommodate her apparent discomfort with excessive formality. Isabel studied Augustus's face, recognizing the internal struggle between politeness and disappointment that he was trying to hide behind gentlemanly courtesy. Her 5 years in mining camps had taught her to read men quickly and accurately, understanding when they were genuine versus when they were simply going through expected motions. What she saw in Augustus wasn't rejection or cruelty, but genuine confusion about how to handle a situation that challenged all his assumptions about proper behavior and social expectations. "Mr. Pemberton," she said with growing confidence, "I think we need to have an honest conversation about what we both really want from this arrangement, because I suspect we've both been less than completely truthful in our letters." Augustus Pemberton led Isabel to his private study, away from the curious eyes of his household staff, where leather-bound books and expensive whiskey created an atmosphere more conducive to honest conversation than the formal parlors designed to impress rather than comfort. Isabel examined the room with obvious appreciation, her fingers trailing along book spines as she recognized titles that connected to the intellectual life she had described in her letters but abandoned out of necessity years earlier. "Paradise Lost, Don Quixote, The Canterbury Tales," she murmured, her voice softening with genuine emotion. "I haven't seen a proper library since Denver burned down around me." Her words revealed the first crack in her rough exterior, suggesting depths that Augustus had glimpsed in her correspondence but couldn't reconcile with her current appearance. "You really did read these works," Augustus observed with growing curiosity, watching as Isabel handled his books with the reverence of someone who understood their value beyond mere decoration. "Your letters quoted passages that suggested genuine familiarity rather than casual acquaintance with classical literature." His statement carried both accusation and hope, as he began to understand that Isabel's refinement hadn't been entirely fabricated, even if her current circumstances had forced her to develop very different skills than those typically associated with educated ladies. Isabel turned from the bookshelf with a sad smile that transformed her weathered features into something approaching the elegance he had imagined. "Before the fire, I taught literature and music to the daughters of Denver's finest families," Isabel admitted, settling into a leather chair with unconscious grace that contradicted her rough appearance. "I had a comfortable home, a respectable position, and all the cultural advantages that your letters suggested you valued in a wife." Her confession began to explain the contradiction between her educated correspondence and her current rough-hewn reality, revealing a woman who had been shaped by circumstances rather than born to manual labor and crude surroundings. Augustus found himself leaning forward, intrigued despite his initial disappointment by the complexity of the woman before him. The story that emerged over the next hour painted a picture of survival and adaptation that Augustus had never imagined possible for someone of Isabel's original social standing. The Great Fire had destroyed not only her home and possessions but also her employment prospects, as the families who had valued her services were themselves ruined or had fled the city. Facing destitution, Isabel had accepted work as a cook in mining camps, using recipes learned from her Irish grandmother and developing the physical strength and mental toughness required to manage meals for hundreds of rough men in primitive conditions. I learned to curse in 3 languages, defend myself with kitchen knives, and make decent food from whatever supplies were available, she said with pride that surprised Augustus with its authenticity. What impressed Augustus most was Isabel's description of how she had maintained her intellectual interests despite her harsh working conditions, teaching reading and writing to illiterate minors during her spare time and organizing informal discussion groups about literature and current events. Her rough exterior had become protective camouflage that allowed her to survive in environments where appearing weak or refined would have made her vulnerable to exploitation or worse. The men respected strength more than delicacy, she explained, so I became strong rather than remaining delicate. Her pragmatic approach to survival showed intelligence and adaptability that Augustus recognized as more valuable than the passive refinement he had originally sought. Augustus found himself reassessing his initial disappointment as he began to understand that Isabel possessed both the intellectual sophistication he valued and practical abilities that could prove invaluable in managing his extensive ranch operations. His refined lifestyle, while personally satisfying, had sometimes isolated him from the practical realities of frontier life, creating challenges in supervising workers and understanding operational problems. A partner who combined education with hands-on experience might provide perspectives and capabilities that pure refinement couldn't offer. Miss Hartwell, he said thoughtfully, you've presented me with a paradox that challenges everything I thought I understood about compatibility and social expectations. Isabel studied Augustus's face, recognizing the moment of decision that would determine whether their mutual deceptions could evolve into something more honest and potentially more valuable than either had originally imagined. 2 years later, the Pemberton Ranch had become the most respected and prosperous operation in all of Colorado Territory, thanks to an extraordinary partnership that combined Augustus's business acumen and refined management style with Isabel's practical knowledge and ability to connect with workers from every social background. The woman who had once shocked Augustus by wiping greasy hands on her apron now moved seamlessly between entertaining visiting dignitaries in the evening and solving complex operational problems in the ranch kitchens by day. Her transformation wasn't about abandoning her hard-won survival skills, but rather about integrating them with the refined education she had never truly lost, creating a unique blend of capabilities that impressed everyone from bank presidents to cattle hands. Isabel had revolutionized the ranch's operations by applying lessons learned from feeding mining camps to the challenge of managing a large-scale cattle operation. Her innovations in food preservation, worker management, and resource allocation had reduced costs while improving both productivity and worker satisfaction to levels that other ranchers throughout the territory studied and attempted to replicate. More importantly, her ability to communicate respectfully with workers regardless of their social background had eliminated the labor problems that had plagued Augustus's previous attempts to expand his operations. Cowboys and refined guests alike found themselves welcomed with the same genuine hospitality that made the Pemberton Ranch legendary throughout the region. The marriage that had begun with mutual deception had evolved into genuine partnership based on respect for each other's unique contributions and unwavering support for their shared goals. Augustus had discovered that Isabel's rough exterior concealed not only intellectual depth but also emotional strength and wisdom that complemented his own more theoretical approach to life's challenges. Her experience surviving genuine hardship had taught her lessons about resilience, adaptability, and human nature that his privileged background had never provided, making her counsel invaluable in both personal and business matters. Augustus's initial embarrassment about his wife's unconventional background had transformed into pride as the broader community came to appreciate Isabel's remarkable combination of strength and sophistication. She had earned respect not by conforming to traditional expectations of feminine behavior, but by demonstrating that true refinement came from character rather than surface appearances. Her weekly literary discussions drew participants from across the territory, while her legendary cooking had made their home a destination for travelers seeking both intellectual stimulation and unmatched hospitality. The couple's success had been highlighted when they were invited to host a reception for the territorial governor, an event that showcased Isabel's unique ability to make everyone feel welcome regardless of their social background or education level. The governor himself had praised her combination of intellectual conversation and practical wisdom, noting that she possessed qualities that traditional society ladies often lacked despite their impeccable breeding. The reception had become legendary throughout Colorado, establishing the Pembertons as leaders who bridged social divides rather than reinforcing them. Isabel's transformation from mining camp cook to respected ranch hostess had inspired women throughout the territory who had been forced by circumstances to develop unconventional skills but feared they had sacrificed their chances for respectable marriage and social acceptance. Her story proved that strength and refinement could coexist, that survival skills enhanced rather than diminished feminine worth, and that the right partner would value authenticity over appearances. Letters from women seeking advice arrived regularly, turning Isabel into an unofficial counselor for those navigating their own journeys between necessity and respectability. As Augustus and Isabel sat in their library, reading together by lamplight while discussing plans for expanding their educational programs for ranch workers' children, they often marveled at how their mutual deceptions had led to the most authentic relationship either had ever experienced. The refined gentleman had found strength through partnership with a remarkable woman, while the survivor had discovered that true security came not from hiding her past, but from finding someone who valued her exactly as she had become. Thank you for watching this incredible story of transformation, authenticity, and the power of looking beyond appearances. If this tale of finding love through honesty and mutual respect touched your heart, please like this video and subscribe to our channel for more amazing true stories from the American frontier. What did you think about Isabel and Augustus's journey from deception to genuine partnership? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and let us know what other frontier love stories you'd like to hear. Don't forget to hit that notification bell so you never miss our weekly uploads of inspiring historical tales that prove true love sees past social expectations to the real person within.